In a world of ever-advancing technology, the purview of sports has moved online. The competitive world of video games, or esports, has boomed into a billion-dollar industry. For gamers across the world, this means the opportunity for their skills to be recognized, whether this be through prize money, fame, or the first-place trophy. With the rising popularity of online gaming, large-scale esports competitions have captured the attention of audiences across the world. Games like League of Legends have amassed over 100 million viewers for their World's Championship in 2019, a number rivaling that of the Super Bowl, which saw 113 million viewers in 2023. But there's a problem in esports that runs deep: sexism. As of 2019, 95% of professional gamers were men. The path to becoming a professional esports player is not an easy one, much less so for women and non-binary people. On top of the difficulty of becoming good enough at a particular video game to begin with, the added barrier of discrimination makes entering the professional world as a non-male player all the more difficult. Rape culture, gender norms, and a general lack of representation and inclusion of marginalized genders in gaming culture and professional gaming spaces means that getting started in the field can be an uphill battle, and staying in the scene at the top is even harder. Women now account for 48% of the general gaming player base, mostly in casual gaming spheres, yet these numbers are not reflected in the esports scene. For example, out of the 239 professional players in the Overwatch League, only one was a woman, and no women are in the top 300 for pro player earnings. Non-binary people are even more invisible, with little to no data that even exists on their presence in esports.
So I'm Sophie, I go by Steven in game. I've been playing Rocket League for 8 years now, I think. Obviously quite lucky to have it as my job now, which is amazing. I've been in, so the women's garball scene, I joined in season 2, but because I wasn't out as trans, I had to basically, I wanted to be involved, but I couldn't play, so I coached the team for a season, and then I was able to play the next season. I think the struggle was, like, a lot of people wouldn't team with you because you were a certain gender, which sounds really stupid. And, like, it should just be about how good you are at the game. But it's not like that. There has only been one female pro player called Karma, and she was from North America. But there's been no other ones since.
My name is Anne. I go by Annie in my personal circles, and my gamer tag is Annie Poo. My pronouns are she, they, and my connection to marginalized genders in esports is through competitive tournament organizing, as well as working in broadcasts for initiatives such as Valerant's Game Changers and Overwatch's Calling All Heroes. I've also done some more grassroots events with Apex Legends as well, and I hope to move into more titles in this coming year. When I look at tournaments that are, I call them the main circuit, really, like the OWL for Overwatch and VCT for Valorant and all of the other pro esports, you mostly see male individuals there on the stage, and that's due to a long history of video games being more, I guess, advertised or targeted towards men, towards boys. The gender diversity in video gaming itself is already pretty equal. It's just that you don't see a lot of femme individuals, a lot of androgynous individuals that are on the main stage as a professional player, people who are not in professional spaces either, working and in the higher leadership roles, in organizations as well.
To combat this issue, multiple esports tournaments for marginalized genders have been created to try and close the gender gap. When done well, these events not only have the opportunity to help foster a space for people who have historically been excluded from gaming spaces, but they also help bring in entirely new audiences that esports have often ignored. Already, women make up 30% of esports fans, and this number is growing, meaning that there has never been a bigger market for these types of events. This is a huge demographic of fans that has historically been ignored in esports branding. However, a lack of resources, support, and research has created an environment where these initiatives often struggle to succeed. But the market is there, and change is possible. It all just comes down to how companies and organizations communicate about marginalized gender esports.
My name is Heather Garozo. My gaming alias is Sapphire. I do many different roles in gaming. So my day-to-day job title is the head of Radiant. It's a women's broadcast platform and content initiative to offer more opportunities, events, jobs for women in esports. Additionally, I operate as an in-game observer, or essentially a director, for many of the top Valerant and Counter-Strike events in the world. So for context, I used to be a professional gamer myself. For many years, I avoided women's tournaments for many of those years because I didn't want my gender to be a focus in competition. Many years later, I realized how inspiring these women's events were. As someone that comes from Counter-Strike, a game that has supported women's events since 2003, that community has far more women competitors, far more women they're paid to do this for a job than any other esport, maybe until Valorant came out. But at the time, because of these women's events existed, and it really provides a stepping stone, an environment where you don't feel like an outlier when you compete, an environment where maybe sisterhood might be important to you, and playing with and against other women might be important to you. It's an environment that creates a lot more competitors. A lot of people are asked, what's the point of women's events? Why don't they just play the guys? Like, the proof is in the data. When you look at games like Counter-Strike or Valorant, and there's so many women competitors, so many professional players, because these events exist. And if they don't exist, like many other esports titles have, then we don't have those women competitors. And of course, one day we want to see the women kind of graduate from these women's events and everyone's just playing in the same events, but it's such a really, really incredible stepping stone.
I mean, it's really important because of all the sort of misogyny that goes on within gaming. Obviously goes on within other jobs and places, but it's very prevalent in gaming because gaming's been always sort of a men's thing with the quotation marks. And it's nice to have a sort of safe space where you're able to compete with other sort of like-minded people and a lot of people that share your passion about making it grow. Like, it's not the end goal, like it's sort of a stepping stone on towards like the main circuits and that kind of thing. It's just nice to know that you're going to go in and have fun, and it's a competitive environment where it's like everyone's friends. You know, it's just a nice atmosphere as well.
Professional players, while they're not the only role in esports, they are the face of esports, and without them, without seeing diversity in esports, it just feels very gatekeepy, very jarring to see a line of cisgender men who do not have the same experience as me, don't face the same toxicity as me. So in some ways, if it wasn't for these initiatives for marginalized genders, I wouldn't feel as welcomed. I wouldn't feel in some ways as safe, because, you know, even within the server, within playing multiplayer competitive video games, it doesn't feel good.
I think we're still breaking away from like societal barriers to entry, in a sense. I was never encouraged to be a gamer. It was frowned upon, and I'll say my parents treated me absolutely wonderfully, the best parents in the world. But I didn't get my younger brother, 3 years younger than me, got a good computer before I did, and it's not like they love me any less. It's just like not what you did at the time, and so it was especially discouraged when I was younger, and I was very embarrassed to tell my friends that I play. Like, I'm hiding that I'm practicing, and that's a lot of like societal pressure. I think we're breaking away from that, but I think that's historically why there's just maybe fewer women that take it more like seriously, because like society tells them that like they shouldn't. Step one is just growing that pool of women, growing that pool of players, of esports viewers, of women that are consuming your content. Like, you're losing a big portion of your audience if you aren't thinking about how to activate, inspire, and get more women involved.
Esports traditionally has been very marketed towards that 18 to 30 male demographic. And also, I think it also ties into this point where we're seeing a lot of these younger female stars in game changers. Like, for example, like we were talking about, like Saunder's still pretty young. I think she's like 17, and then like Flora's like 15, around there. Like there's a lot of like this young talent coming up that's very, very good, because I think the way that video games has culturally been has very much been shifted over time, right? Where I feel like it's a lot more accessible to female audiences than it was in the past, and a lot of that's also been because of like purposefully, because like I think a lot of companies, both dev side and org side, have made sure to like, we want to make gaming a lot more accessible and open and friendly than what it was. And when you get a game changer squad, you have the ability to go to sponsors and stuff like that and be like, hey, we have a female oriented team, or at least just something that's a little bit less male centric, and there's a lot of products that you don't really sell to males. And also I think on average, this is anecdotal as well, but because also these are like generally pretty young demographics as well in the esports scenes. They don't have a lot of money, but honestly, there is no worse demographic to purchase things than like the 18 to 30 esport demographic.
The gender disparity in esports means that while tournaments and initiatives for non-male players exist, interest in them is often low. Sexism and transphobia in the gaming and esports industry, and in society as a whole, means that women and non-binary people are discouraged from playing. This creates a cycle of problems. Less high-level female and non-binary players exist because they are discouraged from competing and lack role models, so there is less of a talent pool. This means that the skill ceiling for marginalized genders is often lower, so less attention and resources are given to these events in favor of the highest level of play. Without the interest or support, there is less incentive for companies to host tournaments for marginalized genders and less incentive for non-men to compete, which repeats the cycle all over again.
I feel like the main demographic of sorts for esports viewers, those, teenage boys, men in their early 20s, probably aren't interested in women's esports or marginalized gender esports because they haven't been given a reason to care. And not just by game developers, not just by the esports scene, but also societally just don't have a reason to really care about esports scenes, about initiatives that they perceive not to benefit them. But I think, to be clear, I think that marginalized gender initiatives benefit everybody, not just the marginalized genders within it. It is important for us to create healthier environments that even allow men to be more comfortable within their own skin, have a better understanding of gender, and understanding that they have some internalized ideas of what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine. This is also important for them to increase gender diversity and just to break down our ideas of gender norms and who esports is for, as a community, as a society, as from human to human. I think it's important for people to keep pushing and keep talking about how, like, this is why you should care, and this is not just about how it benefits women in general, how it benefits genderqueer individuals in general. These are your sisters, these are your cousins, these are female or femme presenting or non-binary individuals in your life that are also could be your friends, could be important to you, and it's important for you as a male individual to support them to help them achieve their dreams.
Hello, my name is Melanie Capone. I am an in-game leader for a all-women's team in Valorant. Currently version 1, but previously for Cloud9 White, which was a team that we won every single all-women's like non-binary tournaments in the United States, like in North America, like for 7 straight tournaments. And now I'm like on a new team, but that's just kind of my background. I think it's really important to have like women's and marginalized gendered, esports tournaments, like specifically, for teams that like are made up of like that, like population is really important because there isn't really a lot of women that play video games already, and there's even less that play video games at a very competitive level. And in order to kind of get that stigma away, it's really good to have like women role models and trans role models and non-binary role models in places that are like, yo, like this is a tournament that showcases the talent of these teams. These teams are playing each other, and you can really see, the talent and the strategy and the individual play that comes from these teams, and a lot of it can be shown to be at a very high level. And it's really good to have those kind of examples in the community, but also because having these tournaments encourages organizations and companies to pick up teams that comprise of, women, like non-binary players and things like that. And when you have that kind of org investment and you have, these players together on a team play like full time, that allows them to compete and try to catch up to a base that has already played TAC FPS at a very high level. Like a lot of tier 1 teams and pros have been actually around for a while, especially when it comes to like coming from a CS background. You look at a lot of the tier 1 pros, and a lot of them they've played at international lands, they played at majors in CS. Meanwhile, like the women they're competing to try and catch up and get to that level, this is like their first game. This is their first competitive game. These are their first teams. And I say that from my experience. So it's really important that these orgs can come in, get invested, pay these girls that are really, dedicated to the game, like salaries to full-time focus on the game, and just kind of grind their way through it. And having those role models, obviously, I feel like I've said it already, does a lot for the community.
So, how do we overcome the lack of interest, and why does it exist in the first place? First, we have to pinpoint why people do or don't watch esports events for marginalized genders. After conducting a survey of 281 respondents, 81% of which were men, an interesting trend emerged. People don't watch female and non-binary esports primarily because they are not advertised or produced well enough. In fact, the marketing and production quality of non-male events made up 72% of the reasons given for whether or not a person would tune into esports for marginalized genders. Many people talked about how they didn't know when matches were happening, or who any of the players were, or even that these events existed in the first place. They also talked about the lack of production quality, hype, external content, or storylines to follow. Interestingly, however, when looking at the games people actually watched non-male esports for, there's one game that sticks out against the rest: Valerant. While other games included in our study averaged at about 10% of viewers that watched non-male esports, Valerant had a whopping 53% state that they watched their game's female and non-binary circuit, known as Game Changers.
I know that the Valorant's women's thing, I know that's like really, really good, and it's a lot of the people within Rocket League compare the WCB to that. Like they want what we've got just now to get to that level of that Valorant has, because I've heard it's really good. I don't know much about Valorant. I've been playing it a bit recently. It's quite fun.
To some degree, this disparity should come as little surprise. The Valorant Game Changers Championship was an international tournament for marginalized genders in 2022 that broke viewership records as the #1 most viewed women's esport event, with over 5 million hours watched and a peak of over 240,000 viewers. While this was far less viewership than major male-dominated Valorant events like Masters Reykjavik, which saw over 1 million peak viewers, this viewership is still notable when compared with other Valorant events, and it shows significant promise for future viewership growth. The success of the event has been largely credited to the heavy advertising and high production value of the tournament, which was directly supported by Riot Games.
I think the things that Riot is currently doing, they're doing a great job at in terms of Game Changers. I think honestly, like, first of all, like the prize pool, I do think the prize pool could be increased, but the fact is they kind of came in swinging and they started sponsoring tournaments, and that was just the biggest part of it, honestly, was to get orgs involved. I think they do a really good job at really like marketing and advertising when Game Changers is happening. Like in game, when Game Changers like International Berlin was going on, you can literally go in the maps and on like the billboards where they normally have like, hey, Masters is coming up, like this big Masters tournament, or yo, Champs is coming up. They actually had the Game Changers Berlin logo, and they had like a poster with like the graphics of like, you know, a cartoonized version of like me and other GC players. And the fact that they're advertising that in game, and also when you go to the homepage, the background is also that cartoon graphic of like me and other GC players. And then there's also a thing that you can click on that tells you more about GC. It's like everywhere. Like they actually do make it really, really easy to find more information about it whenever tournaments are going on. I think that is a great thing that they are like, it's something that they're proud of. And they're not like, this is something we do, but it's like over here. You can look for it and you'll find it. It's more like they are making it very hard not to see it. And I think that is something that is really, really awesome for the scene. And it makes it a lot more normalized. I think they did a really good job of, when we were in Berlin, I could tell that they were trying to make that experience very equivalent to what it felt like to be a male pro going to these international events. Like it felt like I could tell that they were putting in like the same amount of like effort, like from like the shuttles. None of it felt like watered down, or it's like, okay, like they're trying to like save money here. This is like a budget cut. Like everything felt like, when I was talking to my, you know, my male pro friends in the scene, everything felt exactly the same. Like the shuttles, the hotel, like there was no, it didn't seem like it was cheaped out on, is what I'm trying to say. And they were really trying to give us an equivalent experience. And I felt like Riot doing that for us was like really, really big for me.
Game Changers was announced with the launch of the Valerant esports circuit, instantly establishing it as a legitimate and known scene. To grow the scene and to continue to advertise it, Riot has made multiple content pieces about Game Changers players and established similar international competition and broadcast production quality as their main esports circuit, VCT. Data from the survey we conducted matches this as well, as many respondents talked about how they watched Game Changers for the high production value and interesting content and marketing that surrounded the event. The success of this initiative shows. The number of signed Game Changers rosters is currently over 25 teams across the world, with many organizations sporting only a Game Changers team, including larger organizations like Version 1, Guild, or XSET. Some of the largest streamers on YouTube and Twitch also have recently invested in or supported Game Changers teams, including Ludwig, Moist Critical, and Disguised Toast.
Yesterday, I announced the DSG-GC team, and the reception has been very positive, so that makes me happy. We have Jody, Kaide, Sydney, Tenzin, and Miss Tupperware playing in the GC Open qualifiers April 4th, so that'll be fun.
If you don't know, CLG Red is CLG's women's teams, and they have a specific women's Valerant team. It's been leaked already on Twitter if you haven't seen it. And we're going to sign them. We're going to sign them for one tournament. That's all to say that if you guys want to support the new Moist Moguls MXM Women's Valerant team, they have officially made it through the open qualifiers, the closed qualifiers, and they are in the main event of this Women's Valerant tournament. That is April 11th to 14th. So they're going to be playing at some point here. They're currently labeled as CLG Red, but they will be swapped over to MXM, and we'll be able to cheer them on.
In comparison, non-male tournaments and other games have had more limited success, as organizers and game developers in many esports titles have historically undervalued the impact of non-male events. From our survey data, the percentage of respondents that said they had watched other marginalized gender leagues was 16% for Overwatch, 15% for League of Legends, 11% for Rocket League, 6% for Apex Legends, and only 4% for CSGO, a far cry from the 53% that Valorant boasted. A lot of the difficulty for many of these leagues, if they exist at all, stems from poor advertising, inconsistent support from game developers, and a lack of a long-term vision. Despite that, these scenes have a deep history and passion from their supporters and strong foundations and staff willing to grow them into the spotlight. All that needs to be done now from game developers is support these esports scenes if they want to see them succeed, rather than treating them like an afterthought.
Counter-Strike started this all. There were events going back to 2003, ESWC, Copenhagen Games, Arbalete Cup, the list goes on and on. Intel Challenge, that's another big one to note, DreamHack Showdown. All of these events have existed for years with pretty respectable prize pools. But then VCT Game Changers came along and they upped those prize pools. More orgs started investing, and a lot of that is because Valorant isn't as it's not necessarily seen as a red blood game, even though it kind of is, but from a brand perspective, it's a slightly more brand friendly, so more orgs are investing in it. And they set up these recurring tournaments, announcing them far in advance compared to Counter-Strike sometimes, so you could plan ahead. But then Counter-Strike pushed again in that they came out with ESL Impact, and they massively increased the prize pool too. They added a league, so you're seeing more matches, which I'd love to see in Valorant. But then, Valorant topped it again with this like amazing global championship, and it dominated social and Reddit and Twitch for a week. And I've never seen such like positive comments and excitements from like everyone in gaming. So it's like they're always pushing each other to do more and to do better, and that's a win for everyone. The other games that I follow, there's tidbits here and there. We see Riot has launched a Game Changers for League of Legends. It's fewer players. I think it's 10. It's more of an educational moment where the LCS players serve as coaches for the players. Not necessarily a competition, but still a good thing. There's a number of events in Rocket League under organizations like the Women's Carball. There's Women of the E-Arena, which does a massive Fortnite event. So there's a few things here and there, but the truly like recurring things are ESL Impact for Counter-Strike, as well as VCT Game Changers for Valorant.
There's an RLCS, which is the Rocket League Championship Series, like the big one. That was on at the same time as the Women's Carball thing, which was obviously not ideal because I want to play in both and a lot of other players want to play in both. But now that they've moved it, I'd like them to, like, I don't know, show it on the main kind of stream or put more money towards it or sponsor or kind of whatever they can do to promote it. Like, they've got an esports button actually inside the game where there'll be, like, you go onto the game and it will just say live now, and if you click on that, it takes you to the stream. It'd be cool if they, like, put Women's Carball on that, or just something just to sort of help grow. I feel like they're struggling to buy into it because the league's not been run sort of as well as it should have been. I think for definitely for some people. But the owners just now, KCP, they're actually trying to sell the league to someone else, so hopefully that's sort of a step in the right direction. Where some new owners come in, it sort of gets a bit better, and then maybe Psyonix come back to it and go, yeah, look, this is great. We'll happy to put some money towards it or show it on the mainstream or whatever it may be. There are quite a few things that could be done better, but it's also like a growing thing where it's like the admin stuff's really, really good, and sorting out issues or kind of whatever. But like obviously there's a load of people trying really, really hard to make this work, and we're all very appreciative.
When I played in those women's events years ago, it was always like a side show. It was there for entertainment, or it was just there to warm up the audience before the big show. And I didn't like being treated like that. I wanted to have the same equipment as the guys. I wanted to play on the same stage. And I wanted to be able to tell my story, be heard. And so through these events that I'm hosting, It's trying to level up the quality, the quantity of these events, make the women feel like they belong, give them a chance to go on a microphone, tell their story, inspire others. You're already taking such a big step by competing in these events. There's so many women that are terrified to even compete. So we want to boast about the ones that do compete, and hopefully they inspire more women.
And of course, even Valorant's success does not come without its own problems as well. Issues with further growth for the circuit and the transition from Game Changers to the main league have created a lot of controversy, and questions have been raised against Riot as to whether or not their long-term growth plans for Game Changers actually reflect what the scene needs.
I don't understand how the event was such a remarkable success last year. Probably the most successful women's esports event ever. The storylines, the quality of games, and everything gets pulled back, yet they want to increase the viewership of it this year, incentivizing more women to play in it by upping the prestige a bit. Seems like it would achieve what they're trying to achieve, which is having them just play, having the competitors and Game Changers play in the regular circuit. But what, we're going to make them play, they're going to be incentivized to play in the Knights monthly cups because Game Changers is not as good as it was.
Exactly.
I mean, that's just, that is asinine. But
I think
also,
they're missing connective tissue there between the Game Changers circuit and the VCT circuit. I think it's, there is nothing that bridges that gap. There's no kind of like way of translating from one to the other, and there's no incentive to even go from one to the other apart from let's make Game Changers a little shittier.
but also I just don't even, I think the notion of we're not trying to make it masters or champions, I don't mean this in a negative way, but it'll never, no matter how many resources are poured into it, it will never be masters or champions, because one of them is the wide main scene. Game Changers is a niche product for a more niche audience. But that, and with that being the case, why not build it up to be as big as it can be as its own entity?
I think there's a lot of things that Riot gets right. If I were to say something that they could do better, it would be like the prize pool increasing. I think they could match what ESL Impact is doing over in CS:GO, because they definitely are having a lot more international tournaments, but also a bit more like money involved as well. Although I understand the scene is a bit more smaller in CS, and maybe that's why they're able to do it. But I don't know. I feel you could match that energy from CS:GO at the very least. But other than that, like Riot's doing a lot. I think a lot of it kind of comes down to like the individual teams doing a better job of like playing in open qualifiers and co-ed tournaments. Honestly, there's only so much that Riot can do for GC, and there's a lot more that GC teams can do themselves to kind of like keep pushing the boundary, I guess. And I think sometimes what it can seem like is it seems like some teams, I'm not saying they paycheck steal necessarily, but they are definitely kind of coasting because they're not playing in nearly any open qualifiers and co-ed tournaments as they can be. And I speak from experience because my team played in as many as possible, and it was sometimes a lot of pressure on my team. It put even more pressure on my team to perform because we were like the only GC team signed up, or the only one of two. And like that puts a lot more pressure on us, and it creates like, when there's more pressure on us, it definitely felt like we weren't able to play our best. But imagine if there's like 4 other GC teams playing, we'd be able to like, all right, you know, like the entire stakes of the whole GC scene doesn't ride on us to win this match. And then we're clowned on by the entire community just targets us and then uses us as their punching bag, while the rest of the GC scene kind of gets like kind of coast. And I would hope that orgs would, I understand from orgs POV, they're happy if the team is placing well in GC because like marketing is doing good, all that stuff. But in reality, like, if they were able to have a more competitive roster, that would actually get them, you know, more of that viewership that the orgs want, like more of the eyes that the sponsors want. If their team was actually excellent, and if their team was actually trying to make better placements in co-ed. And again, I speak from experience because my team was the one that was doing these things. And I think a big reason why we had a lot of like notoriety in the scene was because we would try and fail, but we would try. And sometimes we get like a higher placing than before. And then like slowly but surely would be beating better teams. And then we'd get more hype in the scene as a result.
Nonetheless, these differences between scenes tell us something important. When branded well, people will tune in to marginalized gender esports. Sexism and the skill disparity will keep some audiences away, but for a lot of viewers, it's about building a scene that people care about.
I think just inherently, the events that truly have the absolute best of the best players and the highest prize pool are always going to naturally get the highest viewership. And unfortunately, like, none of those events are like locked out to women. Women are able to compete in those open qualifiers. They're encouraged. We saw the qualifiers for VCT Challengers League recently had a number of different women's teams involved. They just didn't make it far enough this time, and so inherently, one event in one league is always just going to have better viewership because it's the best of the best, and hopefully we see more women there. That being said, like, I think there's a lot that we could do to grow the overall audience for women's VCT game changers, and I really think that's through storytelling of the players, showing off their personalities, showing off their passion. I hope this is more of a dated stereotype, but I still think it exists, in that a lot of people think the women just aren't as competitive, they don't care as much, they don't try as hard, and that's certainly not the case. And literally, in the room I'm sitting in is where we used to host our Dignitas VCT Game Changers team for boot camps, and hearing them practice is every bit as exciting, motivating, even, and it's not all the positives, it's the negatives, like you messed up, how do you improve, how do you get better, the constructive criticism, all the things that go into being a professional competitive team happen in the women's space too. And like, I just want to see more of those stories told, build that fan base, and realize, like, yes, you might not necessarily be watching the best of the best, but I like to compare that to I'm a big fan of the NFL and college football, NCAA. The Super Bowl is one of the most watched sporting events in the world, and that it has the best of the best players. But college football is insane in America. So many people watch it. They're big fans of it. They've got the flags outside their home because they have a personal investment. And a lot of it is tied to like where you went to school or where you grew up. But like, you feel like you have a personal investment in this team, and you're not watching the best players, but that's okay. That doesn't mean it can't be equally as exciting, if not maybe more exciting, because like there's an underdog story here, and you want to see what they do next in their career.
I think if you like Rocket League, there's absolutely appeal, because it's good Rocket League. It's not like they've taken the worst players in the world and gone, yeah, there you go, because that wouldn't be very fun. That'd be really boring. But it's players that are like almost in the top 100, thereabouts, the highest ranks in the game, where they're all playing together, and it's competitive. I just think anyone who likes Rocket League should probably watch it. It's high level. It's like, it's on when RLCS isn't on. If you're missing RLCS, then come watch WCB stuff. It's one of those where it's like, it's on most of the year round. There's obviously breaks in RLCS as well, where there's not a lot of Rocket League being played on Twitch and stuff. So no, I think anyone who's passionate about Rocket League or watching sort of high level gameplay should be watching it.
Really, once again, like, game developers, like in marketing initiatives too, not just saying this is a woman in marginalized gender event, and it's going to be great. Taking the time to, I guess, hire consultants, for example, LGBTQ plus consultants who can start, who can be a part of creating narratives and storylines and educational resources and marketing videos, in PR statements, in just day-to-day social media marketing and engaging with the audience itself. Education is definitely going to be a really big part of it, and I guess humanizing and making like that main demographic of males who probably don't care about marginalized gender esports realize that these are people that are just like them, and could be important people in their lives too. What if their daughters one day want to do esports? Well, it's because of the initiatives that are happening now, therefore they should support it.
Despite some of the challenges, that doesn't mean the investment isn't worth it, especially for games that have a more even distribution in gender in their player base, like Overwatch or Valorant. Having female and non-binary players visible in their esports scenes is good. Ignoring this audience is ignoring a large portion of their market. For esports organizations that sign players and teams, there's the opportunity to earn new and loyal fans for their org.
So like I think also a lot of these demographics, not only do you have like the ability to market and be like, hey, these are products we wouldn't really hit before, we wouldn't really have sold this stuff before, like obviously you have like the more traditional feminine stuff like makeup products as well, but just like brands that want to branch out and have that more female centric demographic, even on the gaming side.
It's a huge benefit first to the communities that these orgs and these publishers invest in their players. It gives them validation. It makes them feel like they belong in it too. I couldn't tell you how many game publishers I talk to and I say, hey, what are the demographics of your game? And we're looking at like very oftentimes 30 to 40%. And someone from Valerant literally quoted in an interview that 40% of the player base is women. And so if that's the case, shouldn't we see that reflected in the competitive events, in the broadcast talent, in the production? We're not there yet, but we're doing a much better job with Valorant compared to other game titles.
Having like a GC roster, in my opinion, like what it means to orgs, I mean, at least from what I've seen, is that it allows them to reach like other demographics that, you know, like maybe like an all men's roster wouldn't have. I can speak from experience here, like me and my team, like me, Annie, Lexi, Kat, Jazzy, especially like me, Annie, and Lexi, like we had like communities that were very much like very safe spaces for like queer folk, LGBTQ plus, like POC, like a lot of women of color, like very safe communities for these people when we stream, and like, you know, the people that follow us that tend to like fall into those demographics. And for companies, I can imagine something like that, if they want to hit those demographics, it would make sense for them to pick up like a women's team if that aligns with their values of being like, you know, standing alongside trans folk, non-binary folk, women of color, just in general, like having a team like that can like get that kind of rapport behind them. I could see why it would make sense for an org to do that, just even from like a marketing standpoint.
And I think it's important for a lot of other people to realize too that showing that diversity is a really important tool for grabbing, I guess, untapped demographics, like audiences that you would like to reach into. And I guess too, thinking as a consumer, something that has really been important for me to stay engaged is, I guess, watching organizations to really place an emphasis on how much they, I guess, care. Care is not necessarily the right word, but how much they are actually investing into esports. I think it's important for game developers, for organizations from all aspects to really hype up the people that already exist in it, because that makes you, as somebody who sees a person that is kind of like yourself, it makes you feel like it's more attainable to get involved too, or it makes you want to cheer on for them because they are somebody like you.
Well, I know the org we're with really wants to grow the scene. Tadpole, who's my like manager coach, he's always been really sort of involved with the scene and he wants to grow it, and he sort of put it towards the org and was like, you should buy into this because it's a scene that's always, it's growing. First of all, like, it's getting more viewers sort of the longer everything goes on, you know, it's getting more competitive with teams, you know, improving and stuff. So I think it's, as well as it being like, oh, it's cool, look, we've got a women's team, how cool are we? You know, as well as that, because I do think that plays into it slightly. But I also think that the fact that they all want to improve the actual scene, as opposed to just not do anything, which I really appreciate.
It's going to take time for esports to be more integrated as a whole. But until then, these events benefit orgs, companies, and players to reach new markets and propel esports into a more equitable, inclusive, and profitable environment. Evidence shows that initiatives that seek to combat sexist rhetoric in esports do work. While sexist barriers might decrease representation in the scene and establish men as dominant in esports, community and developer initiatives have the ability to make significant impacts in improving gender diversity in esports. For the games that make up the industry, supporting non-male talent also serves a material benefit of garnering more interest and viewership from female and non-binary audiences, making supporting marginalized gender esports an imperative task. Eventually, the goal is for the gender gap to disappear entirely. But until then, these initiatives play a vital role in making esports communities better for non-male players.
My number one hope and goal for the future of women's and marginalized genders in esports is literally just to one day be able to compete at the highest level possible in a game. Not just the highest level in your gender or the highest level in like your rank, the highest level that is attainable in that game. I want it to just be one day completely destigmatized, and it's not like a weird or like bizarre or like extraordinary thing that a woman or someone of like that has a marginalized gender is able to compete at that high level. I want it to be as normal as like, hey, these two guys are playing together. Like one day it would be such a dream for me to be able to look at a team and it's like, you know, 3 girls, 2 guys, and it's like no one even bats an eye because that's like normal. Because yeah, of course they can compete at the same level. Like what, is that even a question? That is my number one goal. And having co-ed teams and things like that are something that I can only like dream of. And I think it's something that'll happen in the future. I think in the next like 10, 15 years, I'm thinking like for it to be that normalized, in the next like 5 years, I would hope to start seeing maybe a bit like a few cases of like, you know, women competing on like co-ed rosters. That would be like my dream in the next like 5 years. But in the next like 15 years, like over my lifetime, I really want it to just be completely normalized.
For the hopefully not too distant future, but I want to see players like Mel from version 1 like playing in the franchise league, the top league. Like I want to see more women at the top. I want to see I'm big on the future of like youth esports, and I think you know it's really important to be teaching this from the bottom up, from the start, in that the women should be welcomed in the youth events, in the collegiate events. We should see more there, and then hopefully like in the future that grows, more acceptance from parents. I'm just excited about the industry as a whole, because I think we are going to see more women in management and production, etc. Like, because hopefully there's more support from that youth level through high school, college, etc.
I would like for there to be more opportunities, more representation in the main circuits of VCT, in OWL, in CSGO, in Rocket League. It would be really great for these scenes to integrate and for there to be more co-ed teams. I would love for co-ed teams to be the standard. Like, your gender doesn't define what kind of team, what kind of circuit you're going to play on. It feels like right now, if you are a woman, you are expected to play in Game Changers. You are expected to play in Calling All Heroes. But in the future, if, you know, there's just more open-mindedness, more professional players that are of diverse gender identities, that would be really great. And people aren't limited to marginalized gender initiatives, because that's the only place that they can go.
With time and diligence, these efforts can change the course of gaming circles so that esports can become more diverse, and so that fans of all genders have role models and players to look up to that match their lived experiences. Esports as an industry is young, and its future is bright. So being able to combat the ever-present issue of sexism while its development is relatively new, will help set up marginalized genders and esports as a whole for success in the future.